Husband kept giving money to his parents. I separated my income. They committed fraud in his name. We reported them. They lost everything, begged for help, and now they finally learned their lesson. I never thought money would be the thing that made me question my marriage. My husband, Mike, and I have always had a strong relationship, until his parents started using our bank account like their personal ATM. When we got married 5 years ago, we agreed that we would share our finances. It made sense. We were a team and we trusted each other. At first it worked fine. Our bills were paid, we took vacations when we could afford them, and we were even saving up for a house. But then, little by little, Mike's parents started needing help. It started with small things. Hey, can you cover Mom's car insurance this month? She's a little short. Dad had an unexpected medical bill. We'll get it back next month. Except next month never came. Soon it escalated to bigger expenses. Helping with their mortgage, covering their utilities, even bailing out Mike's younger brother when he couldn't make rent. And every time Mike would assure me it was just this once. Spoiler alert. It never was. I tried to be understanding. I know family is important, and I wouldn't want to see his parents struggle. But it got to the point where we had to delay our own plans, no down payment for a house, no savings cushion, and forget about taking a vacation. Meanwhile, his parents? They weren't exactly making sacrifices. His dad was still golfing twice a week, and his mom was booking spa days while we were covering their damn electric bill. The breaking point came when I checked our account one morning and saw that Mike had sent them $3,000 without telling me. That was money we had set aside for an emergency fund. I felt my stomach drop. When I confronted him, he got defensive. They needed it, babe. What was I supposed to do? Let them get behind on their bills? I snapped. Yes, Mike. That's exactly what we're supposed to do. We are not their financial safety net. We had the worst fight of our marriage that night. He accused me of being selfish and not caring about his family. I told him that his family was becoming a burden that we couldn't afford to carry. So I made a decision. I opened a separate bank account and moved half of my paycheck into it. The next time his parents needed money, it wasn't coming from me. Mike was furious when he found out. He said I was destroying our marriage and keeping secrets. I told him that if he wanted to keep bailing out his parents, that was his choice, but I wasn't going to let their financial irresponsibility ruin our future. Now things are tense. He still helps them, but it's with his own money, and we split household expenses 50-50. I know he resents me for it. I don't like what this has done to our marriage, but I also refuse to go broke funding his parents' lifestyle. So, am I a bad person for putting up financial boundaries? Because honestly, I don't feel like one. For a while things were weird. Every time I checked our joint account, I half expected to see another massive withdrawal. But since I had separated my money, it wasn't my problem anymore. At least that's what I told myself. Mike, though? He wasn't letting it go. He sulked. He made snide comments about how I wasn't a team player. Once, after I bought myself a new pair of boots, he muttered under his breath, "Nice to see where your priorities are." That one made me snap. Really, Mike? I bought myself one thing after months of saying no to everything because we had to keep rescuing your parents. Meanwhile, your mom just got a new purse, and we both know she didn't buy it with her own money. That shut him up. But the resentment was still there, simmering under the surface. Then the moment I had been dreading finally came. His parents needed another bailout. Mike came home one evening looking exhausted. "Mom and Dad are behind on their mortgage," he said, rubbing his temples. "They need $5,000. I barely looked up from my laptop. Tough spot. What are they planning to do about it? He sighed. Babe, they're going to lose their house. No, Mike. They're going to lose their house if they don't figure out how to manage their money. I could see him getting frustrated. We have the money. No, I have money. Money that I worked hard to save. And I'm not giving it to them. He stared at me like I had just kicked a puppy. So that's it? You don't care. Oh, I cared. I cared a hell of a lot. But I also cared about the fact that every time we helped them, they just came back for more. I cared about the fact that we were supposed to be building a life together, not draining our resources on people who refused to help themselves. And I really cared about the fact that somehow, in all of this, I was the bad guy. I took a deep breath. Mike, I care. I just don't want to be their solution anymore. What happens when they need money next month? Or the month after that? Do we just keep emptying our accounts until we're the ones who need help? They're my parents. And I'm your wife. Silence. Eventually he muttered, "I'll figure something out," and walked away. I wish I could say that was the moment he finally understood, but it wasn't. It took a few more months. Months of him struggling to help them on his own. Months of watching his savings dwindle, before he started to see what I had seen all along. And then one night it happened. Mike came home looking drained. He sat down next to me on the couch and let out a long sigh. "I told them no today." I blinked. "Wait. No. He nodded. "They asked for another 1,000. I told them I couldn't do it." Mom started crying. Dad got pissed, but I stuck to it. I didn't say anything. I just reached for his hand. For the first time in a long time, I saw the guy I had married. The guy who wanted a future with me. Not just a never-ending cycle of financial rescues. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments where I could see him struggling with the guilt. Still times when his parents would guilt-trip him about abandoning them. But he was learning. And for the first time in our marriage, I didn't feel like I was fighting alone. So, am I a bad person? No. I'm a person who learned that setting boundaries doesn't make you cruel. It makes you smart. And sometimes the only way to save something, your marriage, your future, yourself, is to stop being the safety net for people who refuse to stand on their own. For a while things were calm. Tense but calm. Mike's parents still weren't happy with me. His mom started making passive-aggressive comments whenever we visited. "Oh, I'd love to get a new dishwasher. But while some people don't believe in helping family." His dad stopped acknowledging me altogether. If I said hello, he'd grunt. If I asked how he was, he'd mumble. Would be better if I didn't have to worry about keeping a roof over my head. Charming. But the worst part, Mike was still struggling. Even though he had said no to them, I could see the weight of it on his shoulders. He started losing sleep. He'd pick up his phone, stare at it for a second, then put it down. I knew what he was thinking. Then one day, I came home and found him sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a bank statement. His hands were balled into fists. I braced myself. What happened? He looked up at me, eyes tired. They opened a credit card in my name. I nearly dropped my purse. Wait. What? They maxed it out. He laughed. But it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh you let out when you're 2 seconds away from completely losing your mind. 15 grand. All gone. I felt like my brain short-circuited. Mike, that's fraud. They committed fraud. He rubbed his temples. I know. I sat down across from him. What are you going to do? His jaw clenched. I don't know. And that's when I saw it. The last little piece of denial breaking. Mike had spent years trying to convince himself that his parents just needed help. That they were struggling. That they had good intentions. But this wasn't desperation. This was entitlement. They didn't just expect him to support them. They believed it was their right. I took his hand. We have to report this. He didn't say anything for a long time. I could see the battle going on in his head. This was his family. Turning them in meant officially drawing a line in the sand. But at the same time, they don't get to do this to you, I said gently. They don't get to steal from you. His grip tightened around mine. And then finally he nodded. Mike reported the fraud. His parents predictably lost it. His mom sobbed, screaming about how we were ruining them. His dad called him every name in the book. But at the end of it all, the debt was wiped, the account was closed, and for the first time, Mike saw them for who they really were. That night, as we lay in bed, he whispered, I'm sorry. For what? For all of it. I squeezed his hand. You don't have to apologize. But the truth, it wasn't just about the money. This whole thing had forced Mike to finally grow up. Not just as a husband, but as a person. He had spent his whole life feeling responsible for his parents. And now, for the first time, he was choosing us. Choosing himself. And as messed up as it all was, I knew we were going to be okay. After Mike reported the fraud, I thought we'd finally get some peace. That we'd finally be free from the cycle of his parents' financial chaos. I was wrong. For about a week, they went silent. No calls, no texts. Just the eerie quiet of a brewing storm. Then, on a random Tuesday evening, while I was making dinner, there was a loud knock on the door. Mike and I exchanged a glance. He got up to answer, and the second he opened it, there they were. His parents. And they looked pissed. His mom shoved past him into the house, eyes already red from crying. His dad followed, arms crossed, jaw tight. "Oh, so we don't even get a hug?" His mom spat, looking at me. I folded my arms. Didn't realize Fraud deserved a warm welcome. That set her off. "How could you do this to us?" she shrieked. "We're your family." Mike let out a slow breath. "Mom, you stole from me." His dad scoffed. "Oh, grow up. It was a damn credit card. It's not like we robbed a bank." I had to physically bite my tongue to keep from losing it. Mike, to his credit, stayed calm. "You took out a card in my name. You maxed it out. You didn't even tell me. That's fraud." His mom clutched her chest like she was about to faint. "We didn't think you'd mind. You have so much money, Mike. We raised you. We deserve some help." There it was. The entitlement in full display. Mike's face darkened. "You don't deserve anything. I helped you because I wanted to, because I thought you were struggling. But the truth is, you're not struggling, you're just irresponsible." His dad's face turned red. "You little ungrateful." I stepped in. "You need to leave. Now." His mom turned to Mike, tears running down her face. "We're going to lose the house." Mike swallowed hard. I saw the flicker of guilt, the instinct to fix it. But then something shifted in his expression. He shook his head. "That's not my problem." His mom gasped like he'd slapped her. His dad cursed under his breath. And then, without another word, they stormed out. When the door shut behind them, I expected Mike to break, to second-guess himself. Instead, he turned to me, exhaled, and said, "That felt amazing." I burst out laughing. For the first time since this whole mess started, he wasn't carrying their weight anymore. He wasn't trying to save people who didn't want to save themselves. He had set the boundary and stuck to it. That night, we opened a bottle of wine, put on a movie, and sat on the couch in peaceful silence. And for the first time in years, our future finally felt like ours. It's been a full year since we cut off Mike's parents financially. I wish I could say they magically learned their lesson and started making better choices. That they apologized, took accountability, and got their act together. But that's not what happened. At first, they tried every guilt trip in the book. His mom sent long, dramatic text messages about how we were abandoning them. His dad left angry voicemails that sounded like they were ripped straight from a bad soap opera. When that didn't work, they tried to get sympathy from other family members, telling them we were selfish and hoarding money while they struggled. It backfired, because once they started airing their financial business, everyone in the family started putting the pieces together. Turns out we weren't the only ones they had been borrowing money from, just the ones who had been giving the most. Eventually, the sympathy dried up. People got tired of being used. And without a steady stream of handouts, Mike's parents finally had to face reality. They sold their house, downsized to a smaller place, and shocker, got jobs. Real steady jobs. It wasn't easy for them, but they survived. And us? We thrived. With our finances finally secure, we bought our first house. A beautiful little place with a big backyard and a kitchen I actually love cooking in. And the best part? Mike changed. Not just in the way he handled money, but in the way he handled us. He became more present, more engaged. The stress that had once weighed him down was gone, and it felt like I had my husband back. One night, as we sat on our new porch with a couple of beers, he turned to me and said, "You were right. About all of it." I smiled. "I know." He laughed. "I don't say this enough, but thank you. For not giving up on me. For showing me what I couldn't see." I squeezed his hand. "You figured it out on your own. I just gave you the space to get there." He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "I love you." And just like that, I knew we were going to be okay. No more guilt. No more stress. Just us building the life we wanted. Together. A few months after we moved into our new house, I was finally starting to feel like we had left all the chaos behind. Life was good. Mike and I were reconnecting in ways we hadn't in years. Without the constant stress of financial drain, we had room to actually enjoy each other again. We started going on real date nights, planning trips, dreaming about the future, things we never had the mental bandwidth to do before. And then just when I thought we were in the clear, my phone rang. It was Mike's mom. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. We hadn't spoken in months. The last time we saw them, it was a tense, awkward Thanksgiving at his aunt's house where his parents barely made eye contact with me. I had honestly started to believe that maybe, just maybe, they had finally accepted that we weren't their personal piggy bank anymore. But I should have known better. Sighing, I answered, "Hello. Sweetheart." Instantly, I knew. That tone. That phony sweetness. I didn't bother with pleasantries. "What do you need?" She let out a dramatic sigh like I had just slapped her. "Wow. So this is how you treat family now." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "I'm not doing this. Just tell me what's going on." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Well, we're in a bit of a bind." I almost laughed. "Of course you are." She went on to explain that their car had broken down, and they needed a little help to get it fixed. "It's not like before," she promised. "We're really trying this time. We just need a small loan. Just this once. Just this once." How many times had we heard that? I leaned against the counter, watching as Mike walked into the kitchen. I put the call on speaker. "You do realize you stole from Mike, right?" I said. His mom huffed. "We've been through so much, sweetheart. Don't you think it's time to put the past behind us?" Mike's expression darkened. He crossed his arms, listening. I let out a slow breath. "Here's the thing. The past is behind us. That's why we don't do this anymore." Silence. Then she dropped the act. "You've changed him," she snapped. "You've made him cold. He used to care about his family." That was when Mike finally spoke. "I do care about my family," he said, his voice calm but firm. "That's why I'm not going to let you take advantage of us anymore." His mom scoffed. "We're your parents, Michael. We raised you." Mike let out a short laugh. "Yeah, and guess what? I'm an adult now. And part of being an adult is realizing that just because someone is family doesn't mean you owe them your financial security." There was a beat of stunned silence. Then the real desperation kicked in. "Michael, we're going to lose the car. How are we supposed to get to work? Do you really want that on your conscience?" He didn't even hesitate. "You figure it out. Just like we did when we had to pay for all the messes you made before." That was when his dad finally spoke up, his voice gruff and angry. "You're a real piece of work, you know that? We spent years taking care of you, and the second we need a little help." Mike cut him off. "You didn't need a little help. You needed everything we had. And it still wasn't enough for you." His mom tried one last time. "We just..." "No," Mike said, voice sharp. "No. We're done." There was a long silence. Then his dad muttered, "You'll regret this." And then they hung up. I turned to Mike, waiting for some kind of reaction. But he just let out a breath, leaned against the counter and shook his head. That felt amazing. I let out a surprised laugh. Yeah. He exhaled again, running a hand through his hair. "For the first time, I don't feel guilty. I don't feel like I need to fix it. I just don't care anymore." I wrapped my arms around him. "That's because you finally put yourself first." He nodded against my shoulder. "Took me long enough." It really had. The old Mike, the one who would bend over backward to keep his parents happy, was gone. This was a new version of him. One that finally understood that real love doesn't come with strings attached. And for the first time in a long time, I knew we were going to be okay. A full year passed. We barely heard from his parents. We were thriving. We had a house. We had savings. We took vacations, real ones where we didn't have to check our bank balance every 5 minutes. And then just when I thought it was over, we ran into his parents at the grocery store. His mom looked thinner. His dad looked older. They weren't doing well. I braced myself for a confrontation, but instead they just looked at us. "Michael," his mom said softly, "it's been a while." He nodded. "Yeah." She hesitated. Then the words I never expected to hear came out of her mouth. "I'm sorry." Mike and I exchanged a look. His mom wiped her hands on her sweater. "We should have listened sooner. We were selfish. We didn't think about what we were doing to you." His dad muttered something under his breath, then sighed. "We shouldn't have taken that credit card out in your name. That was wrong." Mike didn't say anything at first. Just nodded. "I appreciate that," he finally said. His mom swallowed hard. We're getting by now. It's not easy, but we're figuring it out. For the first time I saw it. Not manipulation. Not entitlement. Just two people who had finally hit rock bottom and realized they had to climb out on their own. Good, Mike said. His dad shifted uncomfortably. We don't expect anything from you anymore. Mike smiled a little. I know. And that was it. No big emotional reconciliation. No promises to start over. Just mutual understanding. We weren't going back to the way things were. And that was okay. Because we had finally broken the cycle. As we walked out of the store, Mike let out a deep breath. I didn't realize how much I needed that, he admitted. I took his hand, squeezing it. Proud of you. He squeezed back. I'm proud of us. And in that moment I knew. We won. No more guilt. No more stress. Just us building the future we deserved. Together.